difficult ear issue, but I think we got it solved. So thank you for joining us tonight. We got Homestead Nana's here and Carrie is here. Welcome. I am right now just finishing up a batch of yogurt, so I'm going to leave you for a second here, and Sam will hold it down, and I'll be right back. I don't want to scorch it on the stove. But yeah, so Sam is back.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about starting a garden or changing up how you do gardening. And I just really want to keep it like simple and upbeat and positive, because one of the most common questions I get either in email, on YouTube, or like any of our sites, or just even in person, is like, I want to start gardening, what do I do? And it seems really simple, but then when you start trying to look things up online, it gets really overwhelming really fast. And so I really just want to help you break it down. If you're thinking about maybe gardening for the first time, thinking about trying a different way of gardening, just kind of talking through some of the options available and the pros and cons, and trying to make them as simple as possible. Because I know one of the issues with the World Wide Web, right, and like YouTube and so much content out there, is people can make a 30-minute video on a very simple topic, and it makes it feel very overwhelming, and it doesn't need to be. Gardening is actually pretty darn simple. We're going to help you break it down. So I'm going to go check my yogurt. Sam is going to tell us about his week back at school here, and then we'll get started on gardening.
We'll see. You said hi to Homestead Nana, Carrie. Hello, Empty Nester. Hello, Grammy. Pam, Christy, True Joy, Jepco, and Judy. We have a full house tonight. All right. So for a school update, had my first week of this term. This term's, they said, is one of the most difficult that we have. This first week actually wasn't too bad. I ended up not having clinical on Friday. We had some scheduling stuff got messed up, so I have my first clinical this Friday. And the classes weren't quite full scale yet this first week. So this first week was actually pretty easy. I do have my first test in pharmacology tomorrow morning. So right now it seems like the class is going pretty well. I've got good grades in it. But after tomorrow morning, it might be a different story. There's all kinds of drugs this first week that we're going over. But I think I've been studying hard, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. It should go pretty well. I did have a little bit of a quiz in, it was like a short test, I guess you could say, in my med-surg class, but we passed that, so that was good too. And I don't have a med-surg test tomorrow, so that's nice. We just have one test. Usually on Tuesdays, I have at least 2 tests, one for each class. So this first week's been pretty chill as far as school goes. I'll be excited to go. So we have, when we're doing clinical this term, we'll have, I'll be on the family medicine floor normally, but this week, for 1 week, each student takes a turn essentially. We have an observation on a different floor, and I'm going to be on the neuroscience floor just to observe. I essentially, actually kind of enjoy these. I do enjoy working and actually doing things at clinical, but I get to follow a nurse around and ask questions, and I enjoy asking questions. So the neuroscience floor on Friday should be a lot of fun. I'm not even exactly sure what to expect, but I know that my instructors were really excited that we were able to get an observation day for the students on that floor. They were like, "Oh, this doesn't happen often." So anyway, after that, I'll just be on the family medicine floor the rest of this term. So that's going well. What else? Laura, well, not Laura, but the kids have been sick just a little bit. Have you told them much about that on YouTube or anything?
We're going to talk more about it in the next video, but you can tell them a little bit what's going on.
Okay. So, let's see. Did I miss anybody? Beth. Hello, Beth. And Chris. Prep for Eternity is here. Hello, Tara. Yeah, it does sound interesting. I'm excited to look into it. Diane is here. So the kids had kind of been sick probably middle of last week. Nothing major, just like runny noses. And we just figured it was a small cold, something, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just kind of going through the kids. And then early Saturday morning, Annie had a seizure. And we were able to get it to stop pretty quick. But she wasn't breathing all that great. She was like holding her breath sometimes after we gave her the emergency medicine, which is scary. So we took her to our rural emergency room here. And they checked her O2 stats and such. And then they just did a bunch of tests too. They're like, we're just going to hold her here for a little bit, make sure everything's fine before we send you home. And it came back that she had COVID. And so we're thinking, we haven't tested the other children, but Annie on Saturday morning when she had the seizure had a runny nose. And so we figure that's what everybody's got right now. But everybody's doing fine. That's pretty much all the symptoms they have. They are sleeping a little bit longer, but we don't really have any other complaints other than some runny noses, right?
Right.
Everybody's doing good. I don't have any symptoms. Laura's...
Yeah, well, the kids don't really rub their snot all over you like they do me, so...
Yeah, not as much.
Yeah. So that was not a good start to the weekend.
Right.
And that's always really disappointing. Like, if you're new here, like, you might not know, like, she has epilepsy. We talk about that sometimes. So it wasn't necessarily an out-of-the-blue seizure. Like, she's had a lot of them in her life, but it's always disappointing anytime she has one. We had gone 7-9 months without a seizure, which...
Yeah. What's the longest we've been?
The longest we've ever made it is 9 months without a seizure before they come back. So that's always really disappointing. Annie she's doing okay. She's still pretty congested. And so in order to prevent another seizure while she's still sick, they have her on extra medication, which just makes her really tired. So she's just kind of cranky.
I will say, I felt like as far as recovery from the seizures, I felt like she bounced back from this one pretty good. Like she always sleeps a long time.
Yeah, she slept like 6 hours in the middle of the day.
Yeah, she slept a while, but I mean, when she woke up for dinner, like she was ready to eat, use the bathroom, and I mean, she wasn't running around or anything like that. But a lot of times, it's like a day or two before she's
back to normal-ish.
Back to normal. But she's doing fine. We got it stopped pretty quick.
Well, that. It still was probably like 40 minutes, though. But that's compared to what we've done.
Yeah.
It was a shorter.
She's
one.
had
hours long. So.
Somehow she made it down the stairs while having a seizure. Now Annie doesn't have the they used to call them grand mal seizures, where you have the
reshake,
the tonic-clonic phases and all that kind of stuff. She has focal seizures, but she can hardly stand up when she has them and balance. So we have no clue how. That was a big blessing, I'd say, that she made it all the way downstairs for us to find her.
It was like really early morning, like nobody was awake yet, and she came down to get help because she knew something was wrong. So, but she's doing better, and so it was back on the trail of trying to figure out whether we need to adjust meds or what we're gonna do. So we were working on that today.
It's not starting from scratch again when you have a medication fail like that, but you have to reevaluate everything over again.
A lot of phone tag with the doctor today because he's also very busy. He's got other people, so. Where did you stop here?
Let's see. I think I said hi. No, I didn't say hi to Karen or New Start. I missed a couple.
Welcome. So I think my yogurt, sorry, if you came in a little late, I was making yogurt and it took a little longer, but I got it off the stove. Do you want to go give that upset little man a pacifier maybe?
Sure.
We
Hello,
put
Nicole.
The kids upstairs, but the baby's upset because he's in the crib and the other girls are probably just playing upstairs. And so there's one right there. So if you hear some crying, he's fine. He's just mad that he's in the crib. But anyway, I think now that I'm done with my yogurt, we'll get started on some gardening stuff. So depending on where you live, you might be really close to gardening, or you might still have several months. But you always want to plan ahead as far as what you want to do. And one of the most common questions that I get is, I'm really interested in gardening, but I just don't know where to start. And it feels really overwhelming when you Google things online because there's so many options. And sometimes people just use too many words to talk really simple things because they want to make a whole blog post or a whole video. So we're just going to break it down for you so that hopefully if you're interested in gardening or changing how you garden, you just have the simple facts, the simple pros and cons. You understand the costs involved, things like that, of different things you might want to try. But I want to start out what I consider like my 3 cardinal rules of gardening, that no matter what kind of gardening you do, you want to keep these in mind. And the first, I wrote these down, is that there is no wrong way to garden. And you will watch different content creators or read different blogs or talk to different people who have very specific opinions about the best way to garden. The best way to garden is what works best for you. And that will depend on what your physical abilities are, where you live, what your soil is like. It is what your resource availability is like, how much money you can invest. There is no wrong way to garden. If you are growing something, good for you. Be proud of yourself. Number 2, grow what you're going to eat, okay? Then the 365 days of the year, if you never eat a radish, it doesn't matter if radishes are easy to grow. You're going to be wasting your time because you won't eat it, or maybe you'll eat a couple, but you won't use them regularly because you're not used to having them regularly in your diet. I feel like I've wasted a lot of time my first few years of gardening growing things because I knew I could grow them easily where we live, but there aren't things that I cooked with a lot or particularly like that much. There really aren't any foods that I genuinely don't like, but I have least favorite foods. Don't grow something you're not going to eat. It's a waste of your time and your resources. So kind of take stock of what your family enjoys eating, what things you cook with regularly, and try to grow things in that food family, because those are the things that are going to be generally beneficial to have in your garden. You're not going to harvest them and then have them rot away or sit in a can in your pantry forever and ever because nobody actually wants to eat that. And then number 3 is to know your planting zone and dates. You can Google planting zone with your zip code, and it'll pull up a nice little map, and it'll tell you a zone number, and that number will let you know when your last frost date is and your first frost date. And that's really important because whatever things you want to grow, if you look at the back of the seed packet, it'll say start 2 weeks before frost or wait till 2 weeks after frost, and that date is going to be different depending on where you live. I always suggest giving yourself a week buffer on either side, because sometimes Mother Nature is really mean and sends a hard frost 2 days after your estimated last frost date and kills all those plants that you just put in the ground.
You don't want to tempt fate with the frost dates. Everybody always does, though.
Oh, man.
If you see online or stuff, like, people always like, oh, no, we're good now.
You will I'll tell you, it'll happen.
Every year.
3 weeks before your last frost date, there will be a beautiful week of 70-degree temperatures when the kids are running outside playing in the hose, and you'll think, oh, gee, it's safe to put my plants in the ground now. Mm-hmm. Don't do it, because one night you're going to have a cold snap. It's going to get down to 20 degrees, and even covering things with, plastic or jugs or something isn't going to be enough to protect them from the cold. Mother Nature is mean. Yeah, Pam, Mother Nature's mean, okay? And she's watching. She's trying to trick you. She's out to get you, so.
Never try to jump ahead on your frost dates.
So those are my 3 rules. There's no wrong way. Figure out what's best for you and be proud of it. Grow what you're actually going to eat, and know your zone and your dates, and that will help you be really successful this year.
Prep for Eternity.
Nicole is here. Welcome. And Prep for Eternity says, with our first year, we tried to learn as much as possible and didn't expect a ton of food. Learned a lot from a lot of mistakes. Laugh out loud. And that's exactly true. It's going to be okay to mess up and to have things die, because you're going to learn from that experience.
Yeah, I would say your first year or two, don't put like a numbers expectation on yourself. Don't be like, oh, we're going to grow so many zucchini, or I want to can this many, or whatever. Just use it as a learning experience, and because you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna have some mess ups, but don't let it get you discouraged, because the next year you're not gonna make that mistake again, and it'll go so much better.
We learn a lot every year, and nobody can tell you exactly what you need to know, because you are the only one gardening on your plot of land, and everywhere is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. You have to learn the tricks that your land is going to plant on you. Pam says Mother Nature's going to be mean this week. Yeah, we keep our eye on the weather here. We're supposed to get a bit of snow starting tomorrow night, so.
Yep, into Wednesday morning.
And then Prep for Eternity says, true, and Nicole, those are great tips. Thank you. I've had a lot of years to figure these tips out by messing up a lot, so just learn from my mistakes. So today in this one, I wanted to share those tips, and then I want to very briefly, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of different types of common gardens. And then we're going to do another live stream next week, and we're going to talk more specifics about like planting techniques and things that help different categories of plants be successful. But today we're going to focus on the broad picture. Say you've never had a garden or you want to try something new. How do I get started? Like I don't even own a shovel. Like, what do I need to do? This is for you, okay? The first thing that you want to do...
You should go from worst to best.
From worst? Well, I'm going from least expensive to most expensive.
Oh, okay, yeah, I like that.
So the first thing you need to do, no matter what kind of garden you choose, is you have to understand your property, land, or even if you're going to grow a garden inside your house by windows and pots, you need to understand what windows are best. So you're going to go outside or buy the area in your house you think you want to plant your things a few times a day for several days, and take note of if the sun is hitting it well, because most plants you're going to grow are going to want at least 10 hours of sunlight, 8 to 10 hours of sunlight, good sunlight, strong sunlight, not your house's shadow over the garden. And so you want to go out and watch it during the day, because you might look out the side of your house and say, oh, there's this beautiful piece of flat land. This would be a great place to put a garden. Then you're going to realize that this giant oak tree makes this spot shady half the day. And so sun-loving plants are not going to grow well there. And so it's not really a good spot for any type of garden.
I would say that tip goes for anything you're going to do on the homestead, is to like look at your land for maybe the first year you're there.
Yeah, we made some mistakes.
Before you put like structures up for your animals or know where you're going to build a road or anything like that. It's a good idea to just take a look at things before you jump into
Something that looks great in summer can be a puddle all spring. And if you haven't seen all the seasons, you won't know that.
That's a good tip.
We've learned that mistake. We built a shed in a spot that turns into like a waterway in the spring.
It's soaked constantly.
It was a disappointing decision. So, but let's see, what else was I going to say about that? Oh, and you also want to look at the water. So you want to make sure if it's you're doing an outside garden, you want to look at it after a heavy rain, and you want to make sure that it's not retaining a lot of water, like that it's not the lowest spot on your property, because the last thing you want to do is have everything flooded out because it doesn't drain well. So those are two things to keep your eye on. And then after if you do that now for like a week, if we can get a good rain or the snow melts, you kind of see how the water drains in your yard, you should be able to choose a spot that'll work well. Now, it is easier to plant a garden on a very flat surface, but if you're like us and there's basically no flat surfaces on your property, a very slight incline or moundy or anything like that, like it'll be okay as long as the lowest part is not part of your garden. You want to make sure that the water has somewhere else to go besides sitting in a corner of your garden.
Not trying to grow rice or cranberries.
Yeah, not growing cranberries
like
or a rice paddy. Mushrooms. Okay, let's see. Prep for Eternity says 6 years later, we're still learning and still making mistakes, but love growing our food. You are going to learn every year. It doesn't matter if you've been planting 50 years. Diane says we don't plant until the second week of May here in New York. Yes, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Prep for Eternity, good tip. Thank you. So the other thing is what Diane said. When you learn what your planting dates are, you want to do a little math and figure out how many weeks are between your first frost and your last frost. Actually, it's probably better to look at days. Most seed packets will say bears fruit in 120 days, okay? That's from the day that you see the little man sprout out of the ground, the first little signs of life, to when you will actually have something that you can eat. And if you're living somewhere like, maybe not New York, but maybe like Maine, you may not be able to grow certain like cantaloupes or something like that, because they need a solid like 6 months or 5 months of hot weather and no frost. So you want to make sure you know how many days are in your growing season. So you make sure you pick plants where you're not going to spend all summer growing this beautiful cantaloupe, and then right when they're ready to go ripe, it starts frosting, and then you never get to eat a cantaloupe. Okay, so
That would be disappointing.
that would be extremely disappointing.
That's why a lot of those people up north have greenhouses.
Right, so they can start very early,
extend.
get them in the ground. So, okay. So we're going to talk about what I consider the four main types of garden choices that you'll see talked about a lot online, and I'm going to do them in what I consider the order of expense. Now, your individual situation, you might have a lot of scrap lumber or special, maybe you have a lot of compost and things like that, so the expenses will change for you, but these are expenses assuming you have access to nothing and have to buy everything, okay? So the first one is your traditional old school American homesteader tilled row garden. And a tiller is expensive, but a hand tiller, which is a little tool that has 4 prongs on the bottom and 2 handles, and you just go like this, pulls up the ground, what, 30 bucks?
Yeah, probably.
Pretty cheap. And you can till a whole garden bed that way. I've done it many years in a row. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. And you can go from your lawn to a garden for, if it's just the tiller, less than $50. If you're buying a lot of seeds and plants and stuff, it might be more like $75, depending on what you're buying.
If you don't want to spend a lot of money to buy a tiller, you could always try to rent one too. That would be a little cheaper than buying one. I know they're not super cheap to rent, but hello, Danielle's Duckhead. Duckhead Homestead.
Welcome.
Thanks
And
for hopping
you can
in.
also start, now it's a little bit too late for most people, but in the fall, you could put big tarps and weigh them down with rocks so that it'll kill the grass by the time spring comes around. And while you'll still have to till somewhat, because it'll still be pretty compact, it'll be much easier than trying to till up grass root by hand. So that's something else you can do. The benefits of a row garden is that it's pretty cheap for a very large area of gardening. It's pretty easy to maintain as long as you keep a regular schedule because everything's in rows. It's really easy to see what belongs and what doesn't. You can plant almost any type of plant in a row garden because you can just make sure you space them out. They have plenty of room to grow. Let me think. Those are
It's just kind of an old tried and true.
It's an old tried and true method. You know that if you plant it in the ground and you at least try to not let it be strangled by weeds or overcome by pests, if you're out there every day doing a little bit of work, you're going to put it in the ground and you're going to have food at the end of the season. Okay? The negatives are it's very labor intensive. You have to be out there every day. We've grown a traditional row garden every year forever. This is the first year that we are not. And the reason is basically because it is very labor intensive. There's just no easy way to get in there except for on your hands and knees and between your plants doing the weeding. I mean, there's things you can do. You can mulch. You can add straw. That's going to raise your expense. It'll help with the weed barriers. But you still got to get out there and do it. So,
hello, Irene. Thanks for hopping on.
welcome. And then some other cons. Tilling kills worms, so you need worms in your garden. You're going to be slicing some of them up, less with the hand tiller than with the mechanical tiller. And also it can cause a lot of erosion, so you're going to need to be probably adding compost each year into your garden or some sort of material because your topsoil is going to keep eroding away each year just from the dust and the wind and the rain just taking it off. So those are the pros and cons of row gardening. So the next in order of expense, I think, would be planting a container garden, which is things in pots, because you don't even have to buy fancy pots to do this. People grow lettuce if you buy lettuce in the big plastic containers at Walmart, you can repurpose those containers to be lettuce pots and grow lettuce in those because they're plenty deep enough. So you can actually grow some things pretty cheaply in pots. The cost of the soil, the potting soil, is expensive. You do need potting soil because just dirt from your outside is not going to, it's such a small contained area, it's not going to be nutrient dense enough, just that one lump. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because, bugs aren't going to be dropping poo on it, rain's not going to be coming in and adding things. You're going to need the extra additives that are in the potting soil.
Yeah, I think your pots can be if you get really creative, probably almost free. Like Laura said, the biggest expense is probably going to be whatever kind of soil you're putting inside. But if you get really creative and do some looking on like the Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or just asking around some friends or businesses, you can probably find some buckets, barrels, whatever, nearly free.
Right. So we use tires. Some people aren't comfortable with that. They worry about leaching. I've read a couple studies on it. I'm comfortable with it as far like I grow my carrots in tires. They do really well. And we also have used old feed sacks, like your chicken feed sacks. You can grow like potatoes in them. You can cut them in half, and you could grow a medium-sized plant in them. So there, like Sam said, there's some pretty cheap ways around it.
Just start searching it. You will come up, like do a Google search, you will come up with so many ideas that people are really creative for pots.
The biggest pro is you don't have to own a lot of land. So if you have a balcony, you could even live in the city and have a container garden, like out on the balcony or by your window. The downside is it is a little bit more expensive, and you're going to be limited on what you grow. Because there's some things like squashes, they have what's called a tap root, which is a big center root that goes really far down. They're just not going to do well in a pot unless you buy a specific variety that's designed for pots. The same with tomatoes and with peppers.
Some of those are just big plants.
So, yeah.
So if you were on like a balcony somewhere, you tried to grow a zucchini or something that just goes kind of crazy.
You would want to make
sure.
sure.
Not a zucchini. You know what I mean. Wait, is it zucchini?
A zucchini? Yeah. I don't think you'd want to grow. I mean,
you know what I mean. A big plant that's not even hardly gonna fit on a balcony. It would limit you a little bit, but
and so you are a little bit more limited, and you need to make sure that you're reading your seed packets or the catalogs carefully. Most catalogs, like I know Burpee does, they're very specific. They have different symbols about whether or not something is appropriate for pots. So you just want to be careful, because it'd be a shame to waste your time trying to grow something, have it almost full size, and then die because it gets pot bound. So
let's see. Prep Free Attorney says, yes, you really do need to go out daily and do weed and pest control. Worst thing is to let it get out of control. Pam says, read the potting soil bag well. I bought what I thought was potting soil, and it wasn't. It was topping for trees. There were no nutrients in it. Yeah, when you go to even like a small hardware store, it feels like they have 50 different bags of soil, mulch, fertilizer. Like, it can get a little confusing. So that's a good tip, to really look at your bag to know what exactly is in it. Because there's even the little ones we have out here, not even the big ones like a Home Depot or whatever, where they'd have a lot.
Jepco says a lot of restaurants throw 5-gallon buckets away. Ask them to save them for you. We use 5-gallon buckets for planting things. That's a great suggestion to get them for free. Just make sure you drill a couple holes in the bottom. Your pots have to have drainage. Whatever you use, drill a couple holes. You need more than one. It has to do with airflow. Like, I can't think of the word, but like the water won't necessarily drain out of one hole. It has to have like an intake air and an outtake air. Otherwise, it just like surface tension doesn't get broken unless it's just like a huge hole. But then you're going to be dropping soil everywhere.
So Suzanne says, find a cattle rancher. The plastic mineral tubs are wonderful to plant in.
Yes, and I will say one thing about plastic. So 5-gallon buckets, mineral tubs, they work great for several years. If you are using them outside though, and you aren't storing them in inside of a barn or in your basement in the winter, they'll get very fragile, and they just shatter to pieces if they get frozen too many times.
Just because of the sun,
so just,
I think.
Yeah, just keep that in mind, so that if you don't have a good place to store them when it's not gardening season, you might want to stick with things that are more like rubber, or there's fabric bags that I've used before for growing things. Those work well because they will stand up to the elements better, and you'll get more use out of your money.
Hello, J&B. Thanks for popping on.
And welcome. Oh, Suzanne, great job. Yes, great idea. So you guys always have great ideas. Excuse me. Okay, so that's container gardens. My personal.
So we started with rows.
Yeah, and then container.
We went to pots.
Pots are my personal least favorite for most plants. We just haven't. They grow better in the ground. But if you don't have a ground option, then pots are a great option. But I always feel that ground is a little better than pots if it's something that works for you. All right, next on the expensive list, here are raised beds. And this price can vary greatly depending on what you have access to and how many you are growing. A lot of homestead channels have raised beds we would love to have raised beds one day, but they are quite an expense. And it's not just the building material, it's then you have to fill them too. And to help reduce that expense, you can create a lot of your own compost, which we do, and you can fill the bottom with old twigs and leaves and then the compost on top. But you still have to buy, eventually, at some point, you've got to put some fill dirt in there, which you're going to have to purchase. And just if you're building a lot of them, it just adds up.
Yeah, I mean, some people have access to all of those things. Like I would say, a raised bed, if you were going to buy lumber and stuff, it's expensive to put together. But there are some people that have raised beds and they just literally build them out of trees. Like they cut down a tree and they put it together, and it costs them a little bit of fuel for their chainsaw, and that's it. I think some people, they might be in situations where they do have access to fill, or they have like a tractor where they can dig up what they need to on their property. But if you're not in the right situation, a raised bed could get expensive really fast if you're not careful.
But the really nice benefit of a raised bed is it's very easy on your bottom, that too, but on your body, because you don't have to like sit down or crawl around to garden. Like I know Doug and Stacy, their raised beds like 3 feet high.
Yeah, they've got really high
because they
raised
want to be
beds.
able to age into their homestead, so they built it so even when they're much older, they can basically garden standing up or sitting in a chair. So that's a really, if physical like heft is something that's a little bit more difficult for you, a raised bed is a great option because it allows you to garden without having a lot of wear and tear on your body.
Yeah, my parents built some that were, I guess
really
they're 2 feet high,
Yeah.
18 inches, something like that. And they're nice. They're really nice to have a little height there so that you're not bending all the way down to the ground. It is really nice.
Let's see, hugelkultur, pronounced hugelkultur. Yeah, we talked about that before here. We tried to build a hugelkultur bed, but it was like dug into the ground like an in-ground pool. People probably thought we were digging a grave. Sam and his brother were out there like 4 feet in the ground digging a hole. We ended up filling it in because we just couldn't, like filling it back in with dirt because we just couldn't afford to fill it the right way, and it was a danger.
EW says filling raised beds, oh Jiminy Crickets,
Yeah.
with the dollar signs.
Yeah, it gets expensive, but it just depends what's important to you and what your needs are, and you realize that some of those things, it's a big expense the first year, and then it's not that big expense every year.
It's so funny because I don't feel like you can say one thing is more or less expensive than another, because even though you have rows up here as being really cheap, what if somebody lived in like a dense forest?
Yeah.
And they wanted to build
like,
a good size, and they wanted to build a good size a good sized garden. They'd have to clear a lot of that land and stuff, and that might be a big cost for them. So
Right.
it all kind of depends on your situation and where you are and what you have access to.
And the last one, number 4, I listed as the most expensive, which may not be true. It's not true for us, but if you, like I said, if you have no access to anything, it is the no-till bed. That's what we're building this year with the double layer of cardboard and then all the composted material from animal stalls, and then like some soil on top and then straw on top of that. It's just like a lasagna. The benefit of that is it's really good for the earth. You're creating an ecosystem for the bugs that you want in your soil. It's also very nutrient dense for your plants. And then once you build it 1 year, you just have to, depending on what year it is, it's different things that you add on top. But it's one big expense 1 year, and then each year you just do a little bit. And it's supposed to also really help keep weeds down and keep moisture in, so you don't have to water as much. But the expense and the amount of labor, especially if you don't have access to your own materials or tractor, it's monumental to build a large enough garden to grow a good amount of food. So it is not the best choice for everybody in all situations.
Yeah, some people have no-till gardens that they build. I guess it depends what your definition is, but some people just have huge like mulch / compost piles that they build them into. So like if you have access to that, maybe it's a really good option for you to do a no-till garden.
Do make sure if you are wanting to create your own compost to use in your garden, it's like this is a whole nother discussion for another video, but make sure you're following guidelines. Don't put fresh animal droppings of most animals on your garden, the nitrogen is just going to burn your plants. Like, it'll literally kill them. For things like that, you need to make sure you're following the composting regulations for whatever type of compost you're creating. So, Tara says, my gardening gets expensive because I want it to look pretty. So, yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I do not grow aesthetically pleasing gardens. I'll say that. They produce food, but they are not pretty. And it just depends. I accept the chaos.
I think to make a garden look pretty, it either costs, it's either one or both, two things. A lot of time, or a lot of money, or both.
Or both.
To make a garden look excellent.
I do think each year it's gotten a little bit better as the kids have gotten older. They like to help.
Yeah.
But, when it's just me in a huge garden, plants are alive and they're producing food, but it doesn't all look very nice. So, and I do want to give an honorable mention to the square foot garden, which was kind of a hot thing 10 years ago. And that's basically when you measure out 12 by 12 inch squares on whatever, it can be used on any of these types of gardening, but you plant certain plants in each square. And that's something, if you have a limited amount of space to dedicate to gardening outside, that you could look up, because it allows you to pack more in the small spaces than growing in rows. So.
But we also discovered with that square foot gardening, it takes a lot of upkeep because things are so close together.
Yeah, you got to really watch how you're letting things vine and stuff, and it's really easy for bugs to hide in there because it's very dense, like a forest. So
let's see. Lois is here. Thanks for hopping on. Tara says it's gonna be both.
Yeah.
With the garden. I like
and
that.
Sharon's here. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. So my phone says that it's got less than 20% left now, unfortunately. But those are the things that we wanted to just mention today. And then next week we're gonna come back and I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about. We're talking about different ways to start plants, whether it's worth it to start your own plants. This is an interesting discussion after years of experience, because a lot of people, I think, would tell you that it's always worth it. You need to start your own plants. You're wasting money.
To start your own or to buy.
Or to buy them pre-grown. And I'm not convinced that for all plants that the best thing to do is to start them yourself. And we'll talk about that. We'll also just talk about some like trellising techniques and, Tara, how to make things look pretty, even if you don't have a lot of money to spend.
Maybe Tara should be a guest.
Tara can be a guest speaker. Tara has the most aesthetically pleasing eye. Like she just sees them in how she decorates and stuff. I'm always in awe of how she figures out how to put things together. So Tara is going to she is going to have a beautiful garden, I promise you. And I will take a picture of it and show it to you all here this year. Because
Tara says she got a free trellis.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Free is always nice, right?
Oh, yeah.
One man's trellis is another lady's trellis, right?
Yeah, right.
But we're going to have to make it a short one tonight because my phone is sucking down the battery. We're sorry to cut it short, but we will be back next week. And we are going to be posting videos every day this week, too, because I just have a lot of content. So we'll keep the string going for the next week. And then we may be back to our usual 2 a week. So
don't forget to hit the thumbs up before you leave tonight.
So thanks so much for stopping in and joining us. We will see you guys all next week.
You guys have a good week. Take care.